Welcome back to Quintessence Virtual Retreat, Embrace Healing. I am so pleased to be joined here today with Jeanie Manchester, who is a practicing yogini and meditation instructor, teacher, practitioner, all of the goodness of all of these beautiful traditions. And I'm so excited to dive into this conversation. But first, I'd love to just take a couple breaths together and just fully get in this healing groove space. And I just like to take a moment and ask everyone to just kind of set their own personal intention for this time so that you're really receiving what you're needing to move your own life and your own healing forward. And also, I just want to thank everyone for taking this time in their day to set the intention for healing. And we know that when we do our own personal healing, there's a ripple effect that goes out into our family, our community, and the entire globe. So thank you all for having this intention in your life. And with that, Jeanie, would you share with us a little bit about your work?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me as a participant here to share. I really am honored. So
My pleasure.
Start there with gratitude. And gosh, it's like, where do I begin? I started many, many years ago. I'm in my 50s, and I started in my 20s physical asana practice, but I had a beautiful asana teacher, Richard Freeman, who is still one of my, I just interviewed him actually. And so I started with, I believe, one of the highest practitioners on the planet, understanding not only physical asana, but pranayama and philosophy and meditation, actually. He wove it all in there. And so that was my roots, but I kind of branched out of Ashtanga, went into Anusara Yoga for years, really learned some wonderful things in Anusara Yoga, actually, of how to break down posture, how to make it more accessible to all people, to learn therapeutics in the body. This led me to, oh my gosh, so many of my other teachers, understanding mythology through the body, embodied mythology. Douglas Brooks and Sally Kempton have been huge influences in my life as mentors, friends, and teachers. I've been able to co-teach with them. And then 11 years ago, I really made a big shift. I really wanted to learn how to meditate, seriously meditate, not just dabble in meditation, and see what daily meditation would do for me. And there were many reasons why. It was a mystical yearning, but it was also a physical need. I can talk more about that, but and so I started down the path of Nilakanta meditation practice some 11 years ago, and it has been a true understanding of the pathway of what we would call awakening or Kundalini Shakti. It's initiatory, which means lineages behind it. There's special puja, and a mantra is specifically melted inside of you in a particular way. And that began, oh my gosh, so much healing. It continues to this day. If I had to choose a practice, of course that's hard because I love the physical practice. We need to take care of our bodies. But the higher octave of this is truly deep states of meditation for me now.
Yeah. I love that. We were just kind of chatting before we started because Jeannie's based in Boulder and I went to Naropa University there. And I'm sharing this because I actually left Naropa and went to Maharishi University of Management for this very reason, because at Naropa we would meditate for like 5 minutes at the beginning of every class. And that was good. It was a good introduction. It was a good, like, let's get present, you know? But at Maharishi, it was like 30 minutes twice a day. Everyone's doing it. It's part of your, I mean, some people were in these golden domes doing like an hour and a half twice a day. And so then you start to feel the cohesiveness of living in this frequency where that is like the norm, you know? And so I really understand where you're coming from in these kind of higher states of consciousness. And just, you know, I think it's so beautiful because one of the things with healing is to heal our mind, right? Like sometimes we automatically think first of like, oh, healing our body, like we have a wound or we have an illness. But what these practices can really do for our mind is incredible. And the anxiety, depression, a tad bit more about my story. I actually was prescribed Paxil at 16 and realized that I was very depressed and I was an insomniac. I didn't know why. There was no conscious thing why, right? And so I was prescribed Paxil. My mom really wanted to help me. She really wanted me to take, but when I took it, I was like, Mom, I don't feel anything. I don't feel depressed. I don't feel happier. I actually like don't even know what I'm feeling. And I'm so blessed that I had the wisdom of like, how am I going to move through this if I can't even feel what I'm feeling? I'm going to be frozen in this numb state. So I'm getting to my point is I found this Kripalu Yoga Center in Des Moines, Iowa, you know, in 1996, which was a true blessing. They ended up closing about a year and a half after. But I remember going to hang out with some friends after I did a yoga class, and they were like, what is wrong? Like, what is wrong with you? Because I was so blissed out. And it was such a guiding, like a cornerstone for me in my life, because I was like, I can create these higher states of consciousness within my own being. And all of my friends were, you know, we were teenagers, so they were drinking, right? And I knew from a young age I couldn't do alcohol because I would drink too much and I would black out. And that was because of alcoholism in my family. So I stopped myself and I would do yoga, and they were like, what are you on? Like, what? And because you're just blissed. You're just like blissed out, you know? And so I'm bringing this because for me, yoga has been something that has always come, you know, I might stray away from it at different parts of my life for various reasons, get distracted, but it's always that thing that I come back to, if that makes sense. And what's coming to me now in my long drawn out story is, you know, yoga means to unify is what we were taught in Sanskrit. And so I'm thinking about that unification of the mind and the body, and also the unification within the mind that we achieve through meditation of all parts of our mind. And so I'm curious, Jeanie, would you share with us a little bit like what your real understanding of healing is for you personally?
Oh my goodness, it's such a big topic, and I just want to acknowledge your story and your path. And you know, when I think of yoga, yoga is the path to home. And I come from alcoholism as well. My dad died of it almost 5 years ago. It was heartbreaking through all my life.
Yes.
And yet I would say it was what harnessed me to living out my life to what I would say the highest that I can find every day. It's a real thing. So I think, you know, healing as I've come to understand it is healing the deep wounds we have inside of ourselves. So, you know, when we say mind, I think of the mind as pervasive through the whole body. Of course, we do have a brain that thinks and so forth. But the way that we hold the trauma inside of our bodies is why asana is still very, very effective. It's very important. I know Vietnam vets could not close their eyes and go into deep states of meditation right away. They would start with the body. And so drawing a focus into the body through the drishti, through the breath, through the posture, begins to work the physical, the gross level of the wounds that lay in the subtle body, as all experiences we have had, and the yogis would say, of this lifetime and past lifetimes. Some of this, I just want to preface, some of this memory is good. It's fine. And some of it is, you know, Patanjali in his Yoga Sutra says, some of it is neutral. And some of it is quite negative and detrimental. And so the negative, detrimental memories that live in us create our reality. Because we're not able to access what I would call the central channel, because what's in the way of that are these negative samskaric patterns. I love the way Eckhart Tolle describes it. He calls it our pain body. So the pain body is in the way of the deeper subtle body, where all of this incredible energy flows, has the potential to flow through us, but we don't know how to get there. And the mind and the egoic structure thinks it knows, but it doesn't. So healing is going beyond the body and beyond the mind into the deep subtle. And the pathway for me has been through initiatory mantra, as I was mentioning earlier, because initiatory mantra and mantra in general are vibratory tools for the mind. They're just, you know, they're just quivering the vibratory syllables. And they literally, an initiatory mantra I can really speak to. All mantras are powerful, but these initiatory mantras are what we call turned on, are ignited, are virya. They're called virya. It just means that, and this may sound esoteric to some listeners. I know it did for me at first. So I just want to preface that, but we would say that the masters of consciousness, all masters, living and deceased, come into a process of puja. And it's all energetic. I mean, I just feel tons of energy when I do pujas. But it ignites a mantra. And then when you begin to melt a mantra inside of you, that mantra catches a current that your mind cannot even begin to understand or locate.
Yes.
So the mantras bypass the mind and the body, the physical aspect, and we go really deep into what we call the sukshma and the ati sukshma layers. Just think of like just going into deep layers inside of yourself. Eventually, you're going to pierce the core, and this can take years to do. But right from the get-go, there's immediate healing. There's immediate release of patterns, sensations of negativity, fear, shame. We hold icebergs inside of ourselves. So healing to me is releasing this negative residue inside so that we have, I always say that we can occupy our true nature, which means your gifts, your capacities, your talents, and fully occupy those, autonomously occupy those, so that we're not reacting to life, because those are the wounds. So whenever we feel reaction, whenever we feel defensive, we know that we're in the ego. I just kind of laugh. I'm like, oh, there's the ego, right? So in deep states of meditation, it's phenomenal because you're in a vibratory bubble bath. And in that vibratory bubble bath, the buddhi, which is where we're making all decisions from, it's called the pre-egoic awareness state, the buddhi, sometimes translated as the intellect. But I always just like to say where we're making our decisions from. It's pre-ego, so gets bathed in this vibratory essence, and over time, like over that regularity of time of meditation, we increase what we would call the sattva, and the soma values inside. So soma just like a lot of elixir moving through you, and it's hard to describe it. It's just energy, a lot of energy moving through you. And when you bathe in that enough, you come back into the world through your senses, permeated by that vibratory state. So it's like you bring a little bit of that essence of peace and vibration into the waking, walking world. And that can look like way less defensiveness, an ability to hold back and listen and wait, to not react to that next email or the person honking their horn at you, or the impatient, irritable person at the grocery store. Whatever it is, you just have much more, we call it sattva. It's a peaceful state. It's yeah. So that in a nutshell, feeling to me.
I love this. When I decided, this retreat is in a series, and the first one was forgiveness, because I really feel you have to do your forgiveness work before you can really heal, or you're just kind of glazing over every time. And so when I really dug into what is healing, because for me before, healing had been like this conglomeration of all of these phases, forgiveness and all of these different unpackings. And I realized, for healing for me, it is like that moon energy, or that softness that you're talking about, that place that's really yummy that you get to. And I know people who maybe have not tried a formal meditation practice. There's a place, and I get my brain frequency patterns kind of confused, but there's a place before you enter sleep where you're fully aware of everything around you, but you're kind of witnessing it, and you're kind of feeling this hum in your body. And it often happens if people like take a nap, they're very aware of it. And they're like, well, I didn't really sleep. I was just kind of resting. You know what I mean? And this is a very similar brain frequency state to meditation. Meditation is a little bit different because when you're sitting up, your cerebral spinal fluid moves differently and all of these things. But I think to just give people a glimmer, if they haven't really done a intentional meditation practice, that you can reach that state and then have this awareness. And I love that you're bringing in this idea of soma, and in my Ayurvedic training, we talked a lot about ojas and soma, and this healing states in our energy field. When we're in that frequency, we can literally harness more energy from the universe into our body for healing. So it's such a deep restorative place to come to in meditation, in yoga, and so I love this awareness that you're bringing.
Yeah, there is even the science behind this that is nice to know, that when you're in this deep state of meditation, and you bathe in that daily, this is really key. Then the nervous system really goes into a non-fight or flight response, and in that peaceful state is where we do our deepest healing.
Yes.
This is essential for healing. And this is where, asana and restorative yoga and deep states of shavasana can be very, very wonderful precursors to meditation.
Yes.
I feel as if at this time on the planet, we are being asked to, with the stress on the planet, with the uprising, that the feminine essence is being asked to be integrated in a human being. And because we've neglected that part of ourselves for so long, the feminine aspect is the lunar aspect. It is. Yes. It doesn't mean it's not fierce, but it's, you know, fierce full moon, it can be really bright. It will keep you up all night, right? But at the same time, the light of the moon is reflective. So it's softer to look at than it is the sun. And so when we're able to really tap into this, what we call sattvic state, it's allowing for us in a really concrete way to pause. And the pause is the ledge of freedom. We call that the ledge of freedom, because the ledge of freedom is if you think about your next actions and your next words propelling you into your future state, you better ask yourself, do you want to say that or not? Because words are Shakti, words are power. And the words that we might, spew out that are negative or harmful are coming from a state inside of ourselves that is wounded, hurt, that is shamed, that is, and we all have it. Every human being has this. And there's a contraction of a feeling of inadequacy in every human being. In the tantric tradition, we would say that is what we call the anavamala, the little one, the individual has separated itself from universal consciousness. So, to get back to that point of integration, I believe that at this time on the planet, the feminine aspect is, you can think of that as the spiritual aspect of life needs to be integrated into the hardcore materiality of being human and physical and gross. That we're not just this, that we are much more, we have many more dimensions in this. But to access those, it's the brain can't do it. The body can't do it. So, that's where a tool like a mantra is just, these ancient shamans, they were called the rishis. They understood the vibrations of the universe. And when imbibed inside an individual, it was like turning on the remembrance, and turning on not only a remembrance, a very strong physical connection to what I would even say like star matter. I mean, it's vibrational beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And it's extraordinarily healing and it's humbling to think that we're all in charge, and that man, woman, that our physicalities, that we can just make every decision for ourselves and disregard the planet is just ludicrous. And so we're really at a precipice, from my understanding, we're at the precipice of the Kali Yuga merging into the Sat Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is a time of materiality. It's a time of deep forgetfulness, a time of inequality. And we're moving towards a time and an age where truth will be demanded. And the truth is that we are not separate from our spiritual nature, and that we are the divine incarnated. But we don't recognize that or realize that in a thickened, dense body. So we need these practices. Most of us need practices to go back to not only remember, but to actually have a physical awakening.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, I'm hoping this doesn't get too intellectual, but when I was at Maharishi, part of our daily practice was Sanskrit. And part of that was because they said Sanskrit, which is actually the origin of English, of all Indo-European languages, is the vrittis, they call it. The vrittis is the vibration of consciousness, and the shruti, which is the sound of those vibrations. And so when you're speaking of mantra, what comes to me, and one of the reasons I love mantra so much, is that through that shruti, through that sound, you tap into the vrittis, which is the vibration of consciousness. So it's like through the sound, it's a direct conduit to that vibration of consciousness. And so it's like the expressway in a way. And it helps because so much of us are running a dialogue in our minds. And so when we introduce a new thought that is this patterned mantra, it doesn't allow for the mind to stay because you've replaced it, you know? And so I love this idea of really embodying the mantra as a teaching to access this, you know, state of cosmic stardust that we are, you know? And I would love for you to maybe share with us like a healing journey that you've experienced, just to kind of really embody, you know, this knowledge for everyone. And we learn so much through each other's stories on this earth, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, I'm like thinking like, where should I start? You know, it's funny because
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
where do you start? But I think it goes back to my father, to his struggles. Big-hearted man, lovely, lovely being, so talented, so smart, and not able to harness himself to life. It was just so hard for me. I look like him. I'm said to be like sort of his like mini me. And so I had a real strong sort of, he was my hero, but he really suffered. So to watch that was just devastating to me. And then to also see that although I never drank, because I had this, you know, I had this thing of, I could drink, like I can drink and I'm fine, but I choose not to, mostly just because of that sensitivity to him and his process. It also runs through my family. Although I don't think that's my issue, I do say that it shows up in different ways. So addictive patterns can show up in a lot of different ways, whether it is your finances, which has been some of my struggle, as well as in my younger 20s. Before I found yoga, I was, you know, massively like addicted to running, and you know, it didn't get way out of hand, you know, horribly, but it was something that, you know, I can see in my personality even now, just my discipline for yoga practices, and when it might go too far. And, you know, I mean, devotion is so beautiful, but then it's like, what is your responsibility as mother and sister and wife? And, you know, that I play these roles in life. And I can see where addictive patterns can come in a sly way in life. So, you know, yoga has definitely been, I started with Richard in my 20s here in Boulder, and it was a wonderful discipline for me to begin to observe addictive behaviors, even with yoga. And that process of, well, who are you without yoga? What happens to you when you don't do yoga, right? Like, what happens? So, you know, I had two children. In my 30s. I had my children, and that process of birthing really brought some balance to my life, because now I was balancing motherhood and healing from birth with yoga and teaching, and that study of yoga that was so you know, highly disciplined, and it still is for me. It's my love, it's my passion. And then, you know, when is it too much? So I can see that I play that edge still. But through the process of, and I would say definitely meditation has been a huge part for me too, because wrapped up in all of this, let's get vulnerable and honest, is body image, right? So, oh yeah. So, you know, growing up, I used to wear big baggy pants and didn't feel that great about my body. And, you know, which is kind of funny because of, you know, just, I love my body now, you know, it's not perfect. It's, you know, but it is just the body that was given to me. And so through yoga practices, I started to understand how to love myself. And so, you know, I think it's not unusual for especially American women, not just women, but especially women, to go through the process of feeling the sense of inadequacy. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. So what do?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
do more yoga, you run more, you eat more, whatever you do more of. And that's really not, that's really not going to heal us. Aside from, I would say,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
doing more internal work on yourself, I think has really benefited me to release anxiety, to release lineage patterns of whatever this body image. I can see it through the lineage. And so, there are lots of things here, but I would say that alcoholism was at the root, but then how does that play out in me as I was not a drinker? It was definitely through physical exertion, which I still love. I love to climb mountains, and I love to, but I know what's enough and what's too much, and that discernment
Yeah.
is something that I still, at my 50s, I still am like, okay, are you tired? What do you need now? Do you need rest? My asana practice has changed quite a bit. I do restorative as well as broken down posture, and sometimes I throw out an ashtanga practice, but it's not the full deal. It's enough. It's just enough to open me for what I need to sit quietly in myself. So, there's that body
Mm-hmm.
that's wrapped up, I would believe, in this feeling of insignificance, or not feeling adequate, which is, again, what we would call the anavamala in the tantric tradition. I mean, it goes way back. We understand that there's this separation from a sense of wholeness or fullness, the separation from the divine. Because when you're in union with the divine, you don't lack anything. You don't lack anything.
Yes, right. And
Yes.
you see yourself in everything. There is no separation, and you feel the oneness with everything, and you feel the support of everything, and you feel your divinity just like everything. Yeah.
So it's that deep submersion into the transcendental every day that allows for deep healing to occur. And that is what I spent the last 11 years very dedicated to doing, as well as to embracing the goddess lore of yoga, where, you just look at the shadow and light of the goddesses, and you come to understand, the goddesses have these shadow aspects, and you start to see who you are in relationship to, the goddesses are just consciousness. They're just aspects of consciousness. But through that, I have been able to heal some of these wounds that I hold inside. And to name them, I would say, how alcoholism or inadequacy lives through an individual or child of an alcoholic, through this feeling of I'm not enough. And whether that's that, you run that through your issues with food, or you run them through your issues with exercise, it's kind of all the same thing. But for me, it was,
Yes.
As an athlete, so the physical has always been a big love of mine. But then when do you take it too far? When is it, I ran a marathon, a couple of marathons, and that was it. I was like, that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah. I can really relate. At one point in my life, about 6 or 7 years ago, I was living in Hawaii, and I would wake up every morning at 6. I would jog 6 miles. I would come home. I would do yoga for an hour. I would do my work. I would, do all of that. I usually would rest a little bit because it's so hot there in the afternoon. You can't really think or do anything because no one has air conditioning who lives there, And then I would get up. I would often go swimming either in the ocean or at the pool we had at our house sometimes, depending on where I was living. And then sometimes at night I would do 2 hours or 3 hours of ballet. And it was good at a certain point, but it also got to a place where I couldn't attain physically what I thought I could, if that makes sense, as far as body image. And so I was chasing this carrot, And I wasn't necessarily doing it to be a certain body image, if that makes sense. But it was almost that I was doing it like, it felt good, but when I wouldn't do it, my anxiety would rev up.
Oh.
And so I was like addicted to the endorphins. And it was like, well, what else am I going to do? Because I'm someone who naturally has a lot of energy. Well, shortly after I had a child. And so because my body is very large to begin with, my natural state is to put on weight. That's just like my natural, you know, like a big German housewife, you know, or something. And so then putting on all this weight after childbirth, because you're just so exhausted from not sleeping and the hormonal, a lot of my weight gain is hormonally. So when I don't sleep, my body gets stressed and then I put on weight. And so I really had to come back around to this place of, I'm going to love myself. I'm going to love myself however I feel. I'm going to love myself however I look. And I'm going to eat nutritiously, you know, 90% of the time. and I'm going to love myself when I'm choosing to have something. Now I'm into coconut sugar, which I don't know if that's even better, right? We just switch from like agave to this, whatever the new thing, you know, monk fruit or whatever. And I'm going to walk, but I'm not going to have that voice in my head, like you're saying, that it's never enough, that I'm inadequate. And I think that in terms of this healing conversation, if we can really just go to that place of really loving ourselves and being gentle with ourselves, not to a place of complacency, if that makes sense, like, oh, I love myself, so I'm going to eat a pint of ice cream, you know, because that's not really self-love, right? That's more like self-indulgence and, once again, avoidance, kind of like maybe, I mean, maybe that really is, I don't know, right? Whatever people need to do. I'm not into judgment, but I'm just saying, like, really starting from this place of self-love, you know, and starting from this place, like you're saying, really checking in with your body. Do you need rest? Do you, like, what do you need? Do you need a bath right now? I use water hydrotherapy a lot in my life for healing. And do you need a bath? Do you need, you know what I mean? Do you, what are you really needing, so that you can express yourself, right, in your life in the way that you came and incarnated to, in the way that you know that at the end of your life, you're going to look back and be like, you know what, most of the days I showed up. I showed up for my life and I loved myself. And out of that self-love, I was able to be loving to the people around me.
Yeah.
And for me, that feels like a fulfilled life, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, a couple of things that you're saying that I'd love to comment on are, one, the immersion into the transcendent, deep states of meditation, absorption, it's called samadhi, is love. It is self-love. It is because you are merging your physicality, your personality is merging with the absolute. And in that state, there is no difference. You are the absolute. And so again, when you tap into that, and I just want to mention this, your anxiety, there's no room for anxiety. So this means cortisol levels are not going to spike, which is what happens when we don't sleep and we have a lot of anxiety. This happens to women in menopause, just sort of naturally. Our estrogen goes down, the cortisol levels go up. Meditation brings us into an equanimity here where our adrenals can be bathed So when you meditate, you're meditating for all these different reasons. It's physical, it's for your organs, it's for your brain. Science is certainly backing all of this up. And the hormones are beginning to balance themselves out, which is going to be better than us running around trying to do more exercise. So to be in the peaceful state of the transcendent is where we heal. And I really believe that this is where we're moving to in our healing and our understanding as we move towards the Sat Yuga, is a deeper understanding, many more people understanding why it's so important to sit quietly and to, even for a moment, not be with thoughts, but to be in the vibrational essence of life. That is going to heal us profoundly. And I believe that if more people we can push that edge over to whatever Malcolm Gladwell says, the 10%, then, more people are going to awaken to what I would say the masculine and feminine integration. The divine feminine is rising through the Black Lives Matter right now, to women's place as spiritual healers in the world. The feminine is making her mark on the planet in different ways that I've studied, that I can say, oh my God, she's rising, just through consciousness, through what's happening. And then if each and every human being can integrate that spirit, that lunar part of themselves with the solar, which we're really good at, we're really good at the doing thing. But what about the non-doing? This is where, twice a day, I just bathe in this vibratory field. And then I go out and I make things happen in the world, right? Like, because the absolute is moving more through me than me just trying to be Jeanie moving through Jeanie's physicality. So it's a surrender to a bigger energy, which is really yoga. And now in my 50s, I'm like, oh, I think it's actually happening, So yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation and just the intimacy and depth that you brought to us today. And I would love to just take a couple minutes and breathe together and just integrate this in with ourselves and kind of exude it out into the world. Yeah. And may all beings everywhere be happy and free. And may our thoughts, words, and actions contribute to the happiness and freedom of all beings everywhere. And thank you so much.
Thank you.